G'day, film fans. I'm Dave.
Hi, I'm Mark.
And I'm John, and welcome back to The Love of Cinema, a pod in which we'll challenge one another to discuss movies, both new and old, with a strictly positive critical eye.
That's right, and to keep us honest while we're talking about these movies, we're making this a drinking game. There it is. Yeah, so if we say anything negative about these films, or stupid, you'll hear this sound, and the offender has to drink. So, pour yourselves a glass of something that's not green, because we're talking about Soylent Green tonight. But first...
Oh, my goodness.
First, the man we just threw into our intro without pretty much telling him what do you have to do. He just had to wing it.
Welcome to the show, motherfucker. Jesus.
Thanks for having me on. It's actually really nice to be here since you guys have been on our show. So, thanks for having me.
This is Mark Monstroski. He's the co-host of the Matt and Mark movie show. Tell us about it. Tell us where we can find it. We have had you both on, but just in case our listeners fell off while we had you guys, tell us where we can find you and what the show's about, and what are you guys doing this week?
Well, we're pretty much on all platforms right now. Matt's set it up. It started out as Matt and I used to live in New York City together, and we would always go to movies, get something to eat, and then discuss movies. That was like our little ritual.
That's a ridiculous reason to start a podcast. We'd never do that.
No, we would never do that. That's not our exact same story either.
Yeah. It's like Suicide Squad all over again.
So we actually had a podcast a long time ago called Video Death Ray, and it was more like really old school cult movies. And then that was in New York. And then we both finally made our way out to California. Matt set up the show and was like, hey, it's nice to just talk shop and talk films with a friend. And that's how it started. So thanks, Matt, for setting that up. So otherwise I'd be sitting in my underwear doing jack shit every Monday.
Good. Well, listeners, fucking go to wherever you get your podcasts on the social medias, Matt and Mark Movie Show. That is the actual title. That is your handle too, right?
Yeah. And
Matt and Mark Movie Show.
Yeah. There's a couple of links to their page on our socials as well.
Yeah.
So
If
And we'll
you
have it
go
in the show
to
notes
our
for this
Instagram
episode.
page, that's where you'll find most of our stuff. So
Yeah, that's what I follow you guys on. I enjoy following your Instagram page. It's very active.
Yeah,
you guys have some fun interactions.
You
with
made this
genre
whole guy
geeks.
start using Instagram as well. So
Yeah, no. It is really fun. Couldn't recommend it enough. Give them a follow. We're excited to have Mark with us. Matt has been with us twice now, I think, and Matt and Mark have been with us together. Right? Or
we joined them.
You guys?
We
We
joined
joined
them.
you guys just for Space Jam, for your episode on Space Jam, which was the same week as our episode on Space Jam.
exactly.
So
It's a lot
at
of
some point,
Space
we're going to
Jam
have both of
conversation.
you guys on. But we are very excited to have this relationship. We're happy to have you on, especially because today, real fast, just because I always have to fucking do it. We have some sponsors really quickly. The music is provided by the artist Dasein. If you're digging it, head on over to soundcloud.com/Dasein-artist, and you can download all of our music for free. And as always, want to thank our beer sponsor, Carlos Barrozo. If you want to give him a follow on Instagram, the handle is cbarrozo bar 2019. That is CBARROZOBAR 2019. Okay, so today's motherfucking episode is on Richard Fleischer's Soylent Green. This movie came out in 1973. Right, you guys? That's right. And I'm going to give you the IMDb blurb.
it was actually filming, I think, when I was born.
Oh, wow.
So-
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Did you? Are you okay?
Yeah.
A nightmarish, futuristic fantasy about the controlling power of big corporations and an innocent cop who stumbles on the truth. Now, before we get too far into this, just to remind everybody, we have a few different segments we toss around on our show. Today, we are playing the Should Have Seen It By Now, because Dave and I, my co-host, we are the two fucks in this episode who have not seen this movie yet. We should have seen this by fucking now. And my good friend Mark, who has joined us today, is gonna give us some shit and shed some light on this because he has seen this movie. He likes this movie a lot, supposedly. I don't want to pimp you out too much. Mark, do you like this movie?
I feel like it's traditional because we haven't seen it by now.
Yeah, let's fuck us. Yeah, that's for Dave and I. We'll drink. Mark, tell me, dude, when was how many times have you seen this movie before we
I
get
think
into
I've
it?
seen.
too
Well,
deeply?
here's the thing with this movie. Kind of sad because I think everyone knows the ending just because of the last line.
It's been
So
parodied
it's
like
just
30,000 times. Yeah.
It's just like Planet of the Apes, dude. It's crazy how Charlton Heston's like two big sci-fi movies, like you kind of, it's kind of hard to escape the ending from all the Family Guy and The Simpsons, everyone, making jokes about it and stuff. Anyway, you're totally right, dude, but keep going.
For you guys, quick question, did you think this, or I actually don't know if this is true or not, but when I heard about this movie, it always felt like people were throwing it out as though it was like a really shitty B movie, right? So
That's
for the longest time
felt it.
I did not see this movie at all. Like, I never bothered to give it any sort of like, I was just sort of like, I just thought it was just a crappy movie that everyone made fun of. So I was like, I don't need to see this. I'll see it some other. I mean, eventually I'll get to it. If I come across it, fine. I was never actively seeking out this film until I found out that the director, let me take that again. Until I found out that the director did 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Yeah,
which is my favorite movie. So I was like, okay, you know what? I just started
That's a good
to
favorite.
like go through his filmography, and that was there. And I was like, he did this movie that everyone's making fun of. And I was like, he's a great director based on the other movies of his that I've seen. So I was like, okay, cool, I'll check it out. And I think, was it the Walter Reed? It was one of these revival theaters. I don't know if it was the Metrograph or Walter Reed. Probably the Walter Reed.
Yeah, if you're going to watch this, that's one of the places to do it.
Yeah, and I believe I saw it. It's the first time I saw it was in the theater, and it was amazing. And it blew me away at how good it was. And it's a very meaningful film. It's about, like, I mean, there's all the social things involved with it, like corporations taking over overpopulation, and then there's all these political issues, but at the heart of the movie, it's a great friends movie. It's like it's like a buddy cop movie, but the relationship between Charlton Heston and Edward G. Robinson, I think he's Thorn and Saul, and what really made me love this movie was just watching the two of them and how genuine that relationship felt. And I would, every few years, I just rewatch it. And especially, spoiler, the last scene when Saul goes to essentially the death center. The story behind that is Edward G. Robinson was dying of cancer. And I think Charlton Heston knew that.
He was the
so
only one
that's
that knew.
actually a genuine emotion in that scene. It's like he's saying goodbye to him,
and that was his last scene too. That was the last scene he filmed.
Let me set it up just a little bit more, just so we can, just in case anyone else is also a fuck who hasn't seen this movie yet, who should probably sit down and rent it. I think it's available. I rented it for $2.99 on iTunes. I'm sure it's very, very much available for anybody who has streaming platforms. And doesn't mind paying a couple bucks to see a really good movie. So yeah, this is a scenario. 2022, folks, not too fucking far away. We're definitely. I'm going to bring this up a little bit later but every now and then, movies land at the right moment. So I think I should have seen this by now, but it was very eerie watching it right now under a lot of the circumstances that we're dealing with. The fucking UN report on climate change just dropped a couple weeks ago. Everybody's talking about it. Shit is hitting the fan. It's been hitting the fan, and this movie is talking about it. So it's set in 2022 when the world is so overpopulated that there is no food left. Vegetables don't grow naturally anymore, so only the top of the 1% can get a hold of certain fruits and vegetables, and every now and then certain kinds of meat. So what does that mean for most of the world? They live on these Soylent products. Soylent is a large corporation that produces these little wafers, basically. There's red, blue, green, and they have different, apparently they come from different plant and vegetable
yellow, my favorite.
It's like, I think it's algae. It's like algae from the ocean, because the oceanographic report is
green in the ocean. Yeah, the other
green is supposed to be algae, kelp. Yeah, exactly. But everything else is supposed to be from like lentils, whatever you name it. So there are all these different vegetable byproduct things. So that's the scenario. It's set in New York City, where the population is currently in 2022 40 million people. So there's literally just people fucking everywhere. There's people sleeping on every stoop. Every fucking hallway is crammed with people. You name it. It's exactly kind of what you think it would be. So a lot of good science
it's like pilot
fiction.
season in New York.
It's basically
Also, there's
but
also it's super hot too, and if you notice, there's people wearing face masks everywhere in those large crowd scenes.
Yeah, definitely want to talk
So it's
about
like,
that too.
shit.
So just to walk you really quickly though, Thorne, the detective Thorne, who is Charlton Heston, there is a murder. He gets brought into it. Turns out the murder was the guy who was murdered was one of the head board members of the Soylent Corporation. So Detective Charlton Heston starts pulling at that thread, and this giant conspiracy, spoiler alert if you haven't seen this, about what Soylent Green and the Soylent products are actually made from, he eventually finds out that it is from undesirable products. Let's put it that way. And we'll get more into detail towards the end, and we'll be very specific when we're going to spoil the fuck out of this movie. Because Mark is right. Even if you know what the end of this movie is, the famous last line, maybe the famous last image, I still think you can find some joy watching it play out. But I didn't know exactly what it was, and it was fun to kind of be like, I think I see where they're going, and then to see them actually go there, because the telling of this story is really great. So anyway, that's the whole shebang.
Great detective story, actually. It's a great
really
mystery,
is, dude. Yeah.
And I didn't expect that at all when I first saw it. I just thought it was like I said, I thought it was some cheesy sci-fi, but it's actually a really engrossing thriller detective story, and a great social commentary. And it's also like, it's the movies I really enjoy are films like RoboCop, Total Recall, where you have these like giant evil corporations, and those are like the villains of the movie. So it's funny that it took me so long to actually watch this film.
No way, man. I feel the same way. I waited until maybe 3 or 4 years ago before I saw RoboCop for the first time. What the fuck was I thinking? That movie's awesome. Yeah. And Mark, I think you and I talked. Yeah, Dave buzzed me. I saw you going for it. Give me a
my eyes went.
I saw you doing it. Mark, I think you and I talked after I saw that. I'm sure Dave and I did as well, about how good it looked. I'm talking about RoboCop right now. But then you texted me just the other night when we were rewatching this Soylent Green for this episode about how good it looked. And there was something about the late 60s, 70s, 80s, the way that they were telling like their sci-fi, whether it was dystopian like this, like kind of set in the future, or maybe not as much the space stuff, but even as I would argue for the first Alien movie, there is like a groundedness just to the production value. I'm just talking about the way the film looks, the way the film is shot, maybe the way the film is acted as well, just the bare bones of the making of these things. And it's so refreshing. It doesn't feel like you're staring at I'm not trying to sound negative, but I could have seen this movie being cast today with superhero bodies and glossy, sexy people amidst a background of, really good looking extras. And,
so,
just a little bit too
Altered
much.
Carbon, basically. It's the premise of Altered Carbon is literally this movie, without the ending.
And that thing is so sexualized, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, cool show.
It's a great show,
very
but
sexualized,
stylized, sexualized, like you name it. Yeah.
So there is an element that is very attractive to me as an audience member that really does help me kind of get into this world. Even though, of course, this is set like in the year. It's like watching Back to the Future 2 in 2015. You kind of like, you're kind of checking yourself. You're putting your cap on for a little bit of disbelief. But these movies from this era are told in such a way that you're watching a movie, but you don't feel like you're watching, like something that's just way too shiny to actually to capture the grit.
Oh yeah, this is dirty as fuck. This film, like it's
dirty as fuck, dude. You can smell it.
Yeah,
you really can. These people, when they find the bar of soap, and they're like, "Have you ever seen?" I mean, you can smell this movie, dude. What are you saying, Dave?
And it's that really cheap, shitty, like super hard soap that you can find anywhere.
It's just a big thing of Dial.
And to them, it was like this precious material. The other thing, speaking of gritty, another thing that I love about these 70s sci-fi films, sort of like in the dialogue in Alien, where they're talking about the bonus situation, and it's never really explained fully. It's just like a background story that these characters talk about just to make it a more believable environment, right? But in this film, you have just the string of bribery that goes along throughout like from him investigating, and then the garbage collectors, and then all the way up to the chief. But it's never like there's no exposition to it. It's like this guy gets a cut, that guy gets a cut, and you as an audience member understand like the way this universe works. And it's a lot of it on the lower end of the spectrum is like they're all dealing with bribery and just trying to like get over each other to survive. It's really cool.
I really like
it's an extremely detailed environment.
The concise dialogue you get out of films in that era. Like right at the very beginning, like a guy walks up and he says, "I've got something for you, get in the car." And he hands him what turns out to be a murder weapon. And he says, "Now you know what to say." And the guy says, "Yeah, but I wouldn't understand it if I lived to be 100. And the guy's reply is simply, "You won't."
Yes, I love that. That line is one of my favorites.
Yeah. It's like, holy fuck, they did not mince any words there. It's like, all right, you know exactly what's going on here.
Do you remember that? Did you guys ever see The Limey, by the way?
No, The Limey?
Yeah, okay. Anyway, in The Limey, there's another line similar to that where he goes, "But who gives a shit about you? Not even God." And that kind of like dialogue I really love, which is another reason why I keep watching this. Like I keep watching Soylent Green.
We've talked about for sure on this podcast about the way sound design for audio specifically has shifted, and it. So that was a technical thing. But Dave, I had the exact same thought about how concise this dialogue is. I know for our older movies, when we talked about movies from the 40s, 50s, 60s, we have all talked about how wonderful and how tight the scripts are, and just how they are still. It's a weird paradox because they're still mostly dialogue driven. They had less production value back then, but it was super fucking tight. And I couldn't stop thinking about that in this movie, and why. Again, if it was, I'm not saying it would be bad or negative if it was made today, but I know there would probably be way more dialogue. It would be the way, I don't know if it's the series mindset we're in with everything is a series now. So a lot of it is dialogue driven in another way. You know, the story is going to be presented so heavily through, you know, heavy dialogue driven scenes.
Unless A24 did it, in which case you'd be fine.
Are they doing series yet? Have they started with series yet? A24?
No, I don't think so.
No. Well, good. All right. But yeah, dude, I did think about the same thing. And that was why there were several scenes in this movie that are very heavily and obviously ADR'd, where they recorded after the fact. So Charlton Heston went into a booth after the filming.
One of the lines was dubbed completely, one of the actors, because he had a
lieutenant.
He had a Texas drawl and it didn't fit the character, so someone else did his dialogue.
So obviously there's ways, if anyone who's sitting at home.
That did not sync up at all.
I don't think that necessarily so helped, but there were ones that were further away at a distance. You know, when Charlton Heston goes back to the apartment and he's walking around, it's very clearly ADR'd when he's, I don't know if it's the first time he's asking the bodyguard questions when he's investigating, but I remember
when he turns up to the murder investigation and treats it like fucking Whole Foods and just loots the fridge and takes everything.
Just fucking takes everything, dude. But I liked how it was I liked how it was so concise that they got away with it. I think they got away with ADRing that entire thing because it wasn't, the fuck are we going to cut and how are we going to make this
You occasionally notice it, but then you get caught up in what's going on again and it goes away.
Well, to me, that stuff doesn't bother me as much because I'm so used to that in like Indiana Jones, in Blade Runner. So it's kind of like I grew up with that, and it always just felt like, okay, that's what they just had to deal with back then. And, you know, they don't have like the technology that we have now. So it's sort of like, it's okay. It doesn't like, I mean, I've seen this a bunch of times. So it's just like smoothed over and I'm like, whatever.
And that stuff never bothers me. I mean, there is something weird. I mentioned it earlier about like they had, and part of it I think might be technical limitations of their time, but you know you're watching a movie when you watch a movie from more than 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, just because of the technical stuff, but it never seems to get in the way of believability.
Well, the physical effects are so good. Like those backdrops of the city and those massive crowd scenes.
Yeah, what the fuck was
they
that?
Look
Dave,
amazing.
how did they do that, dude?
It looks great. By the way, another piece of dialogue that I really liked was, remember when he has a cigarette and he goes, if I had access to these, I'd smoke 2 to 3 of them per day. There's like all these really dumb jokes, but they also like give you an idea of what the environment's like.
Dave, what did you think, dude? I feel like overall first impressions, what'd you think, man?
I found it slow in the way that Blade Runner is slow. Where like the story is plodding along. There were a couple of times they were like almost like little threads and clues set up that didn't go anywhere. And I kind of felt like they were a little bit like space fillers, but otherwise it's a good story. I mean, this thing gets points for talking about like climate change before it was cool. And, you know, it's a statement on classism that obviously nobody in the 70s listened to. And, you know, this is handling all of this, like everything. And the main plot line, which turns out to be this big reveal, like, how is that not a QAnon conspiracy right now?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
It's actually,
Go ahead.
now
It's
that
like
you
they're
said it, it's a
feeding
very,
us people. Yeah, they're feeding
it's a
us
very
people.
relevant film.
Yeah.
this is the beginning of it right now, Dave.
Yeah, I
You
just started it.
Good job.
Also,
You
because I
fucking
said those
started
words, we're also on a watch list. Sorry, Mark.
it. No, honestly. I mean, you're totally right, dude. Like, look, when sci-fi, we've said this before, but it's always worth saying again, when sci-fi approaches these big themes really, really well in a grounded way, and it doesn't seem like a heightened fairy tale if they're told in such a way that it starts to speak to the experience you're having right now in present day. I would say that is the mission of all sci-fi, whether it's written down or a movie or television. I think there's something that's where the treasure is. That's the achievement, right, of that story.
Yeah.
So again, for me, I don't know if this was meant to be, if I was meant to not watch this movie until right now, but I've been reading a lot about that UN report, everything that everybody's talking about. Of course, they've been talking about it for years and years, but it seems to be a little bit heightened right now, just in the news and stuff. I don't know, dude. This is, I feel like we're kind of we're at the way past the 11th hour, right? We're probably at 11:59.
Well, actually, it's 11:59 and 57 seconds. I think we're up to on the
59, yeah,
doomsday clock,
way
but,
more.
officially. But yeah, like all the things they called in this, like when they brought up the sea kelp issue and the plankton in the ocean, like all that stuff is real and has happened. Like we've reduced fish in the sea by 90% and all those sort of things. And they called it in 73.
It's fucking terrifying to me. And did you guys have this thought too? How do I say this? It wasn't the movie that scared me, but every now and then it would kind of poke into my brain just a little bit while I was watching it. And then as soon as it was over, I was just kind of sitting there after the very cool, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but what they do with the opening and the ending credits, the way that ties into what happens in the story. I'll mention that in a second. But after it was over, I was just sitting there. There was an extra terrifying element to this for me, because if they were that scared that they thought that this movie was worth making in 1973, anyone who is kind of a big fan of these issues knows that ExxonMobil technically had science written on what they thought was going to be the impact of what they were doing in the 70s. We just didn't know about those papers for about 20 more years. So there was research, but it was mostly still existing in the sci-fi zeitgeist. People were talking about this stuff on Star Trek and in the books about what global warming was going to be. So when I finally ended this movie, I had a terrifying moment where I was like, if they could only see what has happened to this planet, what we're casually living with right now, the death, the hundreds of thousands of people that die every year from this shit. It's not a fucking movie anymore. Well, it kind of shook me for a minute. I was like, wow, this is...
that made me think as well. Have you seen the movie Tomorrowland? Because Laurie has a fantastic rant in that. Near the end of it, where he's like, we knew this was coming. We sent images to you, like into your mind. You turned it into entertainment. And I was like, oh my God, that's good. That's great. It's the best part of that movie. Yeah. But which you still can't get on Disney Plus. Get your shit together, Disney Plus. Sort out your licensing. That thing's been on there for like a year and a half now, and I still can't play it. Sort your shit out.
Come on, Disney Plus.
Thanks for coming. My
it's
TED
a good
talk.
point, though. I'm glad he said that, and you turn it into entertainment. Which why we do these. I think it's part of the reason why we try to talk about this crap, even if we're making jokes and drinking beer and stuff. Like, what's the difference between entertainment and something more? I think it depends on the person and how they feel about what they experience with that story. And so I don't know. I think it's always going to. I don't know if we can say objectively something is art and something is entertainment, but there is clearly value in certain things that are presented as entertainment. And I do think it is our job to like take that shit away and be like, okay, maybe there's enough truth to this that I should be scared and I should maybe change my fucking lifestyle a little bit and start supporting things that are going to help change this if I care about it. Yada yada yada. Anyway,
well, to me, like good sci-fi is also very good satire. Like all my favorite sci-fi films, they're very good satires on like present day life, just viewed through the spectrum of like the future. because maybe it's easier for people to digest if they see something in the future rather than like it's weird. It's like you tell something present day, like these are the things that are wrong, and then you show them something in the future and maybe they'll learn something from it. Although in the case of Soylent Green, maybe I guess nobody really watched the movie, so no one learned any sort of lesson.
I think a lot of people watched the at least everyone's seen like at the end of it. But I want to bring it back. I had a love-hate relationship with the lighting in this movie. There were times, there were times when the lighting setups were just completely fucking inconsistent.
There was one that I noticed. There was one I definitely noticed at the end when he's dying, and then it cuts to a close-up of him, and it's completely the lighting is completely different. I wasn't distracted too much.
The hotel room where they suddenly cut to that low shot, or like not the hotel room, where he's gone to visit the apartment. The apartment, yeah. And he's sitting in the chair, and they cut to this one low shot, and there's just this big black shadow behind him, and then they cut back to the room and it's just bright curtains there, and I'm like oh did somebody set that up in a corner or something? Like it was really fucking bad.
Yeah, I'm giving it to you. I wasn't distracted by that stuff. Even the thing at the end, it was that same fucking thing I'm talking about. I was kind of hooked by that point. So when I did notice the inconsistencies, I was like,
consequently,
I inversely, I don't care.
Inversely to that, like the opening scene where they're in their apartment and you've got these bare bulbs and it's lit beautifully and the bulbs are like visible in camera and there's all this practical stuff going on. I did find it pretty funny that like, the part of the scenario in the first that they set up that the lights start to go out. And he jumps on a bike and starts pedaling for electricity. And I'm like, yeah, that's how we do it in New York City.
That's what I wish.
Yeah, no, for real. My wife's living her on the Peloton right now, keeping our router on.
Dude, I would have done that fucking shit. I would have not paid fucking Con Ed hundreds of thousands of dollars. Mark, let's get back to do what you were talking about at the beginning, because I didn't plan on seeing the companion piece between Edward G. Robinson and Charlton Heston. It opens with it in their apartment, their relationship. They say "I love you" to each other like 4 or 5 times in this movie.
Yeah.
And then,
but it's always done in a way where it's not really. It doesn't feel like they're joking about it. It's sort of. I mean, there's that one where he grabs his cheek and he says, "Well, you love me." But of the other parts of this, especially toward the end, it's like you can tell they mean it. It's really cool. Also. I think my favorite scene is after he's gathered all the food and they sit down for a meal. Yeah. By the way, I love that detail that Thorne has to not use him, but he essentially is having him taste things because he's never had them before. So he has to give it to Saul to figure it out for him. And I thought that was a really cool dynamic. But anyway, going back to that scene when they're both eating and he's having essentially his first meal, it's brilliant. There's so many great scenes between the two of them that I don't know. That's another thing that brings me back to the movie.
Say it again, Dave.
Have you read the book this is based on?
Okay.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, I can't remember who wrote it. I think it's called Make Room, Make Room. There's a reference to it. Someone says "make room" in the church later. But yeah, I'm very curious. I hoped someone had read it so that we could discover how much of that they bought from the book and how much of that was like an on-set choice for performance
with the food, the making of the meal,
the little things like that.
Yeah. I mean, it really brought it home because for me, there was a sensual aspect to that was lacking in this entire world. Like I said earlier, that this movie smells like you can smell it. That is true, but I think when you use the word sensual, there's usually something kind of pleasant or provocative about it, and that was like missing completely. This was a very green film. The way it looked aesthetically, there wasn't a lot of color in the movie. And then they get to, I think he brings a tomato, a couple apples, a little lettuce, celery,
like a celery.
Yeah, just a stalk of celery. So when they get to we're just sitting in these close-ups.
That's how bleak it's got, folks. They're excited about celery.
Honestly, too. No, but I can totally. I was there. I feel like I was like, oh my god, I can imagine. So that was the first one of their really emotional scenes. Even though the first one really got me, just the setup. I didn't know anything about these guys. They just live together. I don't know if they're friends, brother, father, son. It didn't matter. I was on board with their relationship. This relationship builds to, as Saul, Edward G. Robinson is basically the researcher for Charlton Heston's detective. He realizes what the truth is, and it just knocks his socks off. He gets very upset, and he goes to another resource who was at one point a judge, it seems like, and this female judge tells him that this is totally true and that this is why this guy was killed. And then she makes a comment about how God doesn't exist because he says something like, oh my God. And he decides the only place to try to find God is to go home. So there are these facilities where I guess people at any age, it seemed like they were older people or people with, bad situations. They were going to this facility.
They can
to
go on
be
Logan's
killed.
Run themselves.
Yeah, it's like an assisted suicide, sort of.
Yeah, it's like the suicide boots
beautiful.
in Futurama.
So they make these amazing, you take this drink. I guess the drink is what's going to kill you. You lay on this bed. You get to watch this amazing movie of just footage of what Earth used to look like. Color, animals, food, weddings,
and it's so vibrant,
nature, weather. It's so vibrant. It surrounds you. And so the reason I'm saying this is because it builds to this scene where Charlton busts in and he basically gets to look through this glass screen and say goodbye to his friend as his friend watches this movie and dies. And it's so fucking touching. Mark, I can't remember which one of you mentioned it earlier. Edward G. Robinson was actually dying from cancer in real life, so there was that heightened element. But it doesn't matter if you know that or not. That scene is fucking powerful. When he's just watching him.
It was, but did
in
you
his last
did you
moment?
Find
Did
you find it just a little bit too long?
No,
we're listening
I thought
to
it
an
was
overture while the Apple TV screen plays for 5 minutes.
Well, think about it this way: he asks for the full 20. He asks for the full 20 minutes, right? So I think that when they played it that long, it works. But the other thing is, like, not to jump back, but if you look at every scene in this movie, they're played out very slowly. They take time to develop the scene, which is really nice. And there are a lot of parts of no dialogue. And you're just watching a character move through something or observe, right? And the same with that last scene with Saul. It's like, it's allowing you to spend time with this character as he's observing his final moments, And I think it's good for it to be long. And I'll admit something which I like admitting to. Every fucking time I see that scene, it makes me cry. I don't know why.
I mean,
dude, Charlton,
that's a well-performed scene.
I'll raise you one even higher. He's so good at the end of what have we done, you idiots? He's so good at those big, powerful moments.
I did have one comical thought in it though. Like if when they lose the audio, if this was remade in 2021, they'd be like, "Saul, you're on mute," knocking on the window.
By the way, did you guys? Here's one thing that is like, I think it's funny. I'll probably get buzzed for this, but if you look at the I think it's like a status light. I forget what it says in it, but in order to make it look like it's like they're having a signal issue, if you watch it flashing in and out, there's an XLR cable plugged in on the left side, and you see the wire jump like stop motion, because in order to create that effect, they just took two stills and flashed them.
Oh no.
Wow.
So watch it again, and you'll see that wire jump back.
We don't buzz for pointing out goofs. That's a good one.
That's funny. I do think, Dave, though, I know what you mean. I had a moment when I was sitting there watching, and I was thinking like, oh wow, we're gonna see the full 20, and it was one of those moments where like, I really do think this, guys. I think we're being conditioned with faster paced stuff nowadays. That as soon as we get the point that the scene is offering to a story, move on, please. There's a little bit of us that struggles to like sit back. So I had a moment where I was like, I think I know what's happening. I think we all know what's happening. Let's get back to the detective story. But once I unleash that, and it goes back and forth so much between Charlton and what Saul, Edward G. Robinson, is looking at. And that video is so captivating that I also thought in the same time, I was like, no, go there. Really show it to us. And he did. He takes his time. You watch this whole fucking movie almost. It's not actually 20 minutes, but it feels like it's longer than, just enough for you to get the point of the scene. And when it's done, you kind of die with him. So that once you return to this disgusting living hell that Charlton is still stuck in. And right after that, Charlton goes down and realizes what's happening to the bodies. So it's almost like you finally have this brief moment of escape, and you see what beauty is. And Charlton has how could I have known? I couldn't have known. It's just talking about the beauty of what Earth used to be like. So he finally has this gigantic deliverance watching his friend pass away in this very moving movie. And then he goes down and realizes that everybody is being turned into fucking food. I felt like if they had done any faster, I think it may have felt cheap. I had the same trigger you did. I think I was like, really, they're gonna take their time, but I think it would have cheapened the sequence.
But if you see this movie, how it takes its time with things, it makes transitions to those. Okay, so it's going from a death scene to a reveal that these people are getting sent to a processing plant, right? But as you watch that, it doesn't feel abrupt. That shift in tone does not feel abrupt at all. It just, all these scenes just flow so well into each other. That's what I love. Yeah. Like the editing of this film is fantastic. Everything flows. Oh, here's another thing too.
Except when they're on the phone. When they're on the phone, the editing is terrible.
What was that?
By the way, I love like Ozu films, so anything that's slow to me doesn't bother me at all. And in fact, it's refreshing because anything I watch on like YouTube or like everyone's conditioned since Vine, where you had like the 6-second stories, right?
Yeah.
And now you have TikTok. Everyone just wants stuff so fast. So to go back to these old movies, it feels more like you're enjoying yourself reading a book because it's slowly unfolding. And I prefer that. The fast-paced stuff, I'll be honest, I've fallen asleep through more fast-paced stuff. Like F9, I passed out during like the action sequences because everything is just so fast-paced and you're just getting bombarded with information. I'll drink to that.
I agree, man. It can be, don't get me wrong, anything that's done well can be fun, but I think we are leaning on that a lot right now. There's a great, I don't know if it still exists, but there was a great YouTube side-by-side after The Rise of Skywalker came out, and it was showing one of the Death Star scenes from A New Hope cut with this final fight. And it was like versus, I remember the first time I saw A New Hope, I thought the editing was perfect. It was very captivating. Well, but compared to how it's the equivalent of watching Skywalker fight scenes are, it was crazy.
This is how I compare old and new films. Like old films, you're like watching a chess match, right? And then now films today, you're like watching dodgeball. There's like
it's kind of like somebody
huge difference in the way they set up.
Somebody got the BPM 11? And just cranked it up.
By the way, my first sip of beer and I spilled it on myself.
Oh, that happens to everyone on this show. Don't worry about it.
F9 judges you.
I had a fucking beer apocalypse on like our second episode.
Come on, man. That's what you get for talking shit about Dom and the gang. No, but I agree. I think I watched this by myself. I didn't have any pressure, context, time pressures around me at all. So I was very relaxed. I think I was in a good space for it. It didn't feel slow to me. It felt like it was where it needed to be. I was actually going to point out the same thing though, Mark, that, and I was thinking directorially, there was a lot of coverage after he sees his friend pass away and he goes further into this waste plant, further and further down, basically. There's a lot of shots of Charlton just looking at things as he's running and climbing ladders and shit. But
it makes you realize how massive this facility is, though, also, right? Doesn't it? Because it's like it's so big, it's almost maze-like, and he's climbing up ladders. By the way,
we're learning something with every level.
There is one solid. But
did you see him climb the ladder? And you're like, oh shit, Charlton Heston is old when he starts climbing the ladder.
when he clocks that factory worker, and the guy falls onto like the lid of one of the things, and then face plants in the conveyor belt. I was like, oh.
He throws so many people to their
that's a solid fucking practical stunt.
Dude, how about the fucking scoopers? All those extras that were getting fucking
seriously. When he said the scoopers are on their way, I thought it was slang for something, and it just wasn't. And these fucking scoopers turn up and start scooping. And I'm sorry. The one big issue I have with this is when the potential assassin there, takes a couple of shots at him.
Explain the scene for everybody.
They're having a riot over they basically ran out of Soylent Green. They ran out of Soylent Green, and a woman walks out screaming about like they only gave me half a kilo. Which good news, America. Apparently by 2022 you're in the metric system. Welcome to the rest of the world. Yeah.
Well, we did one thing smart.
Good luck with them. Yeah. Good luck with the math, you fuckers. Okay, yeah. But it's just.
Oh. Yeah, I got you, motherfucker.
Okay. But basically, they're having this riot because the Soylent Green has run out, and then this one person in the crowd tries to assassinate Charlton Heston, and he nails two other people. He doesn't get him. Like they conveniently step in front of the shot and get shot instead. And but at this point, they've also like they've got a bit rowdy, so the cops are like, move along, the scoopers are coming. And you're like, what the fuck are the scoopers? And then literally these fucking like dirt scoopers turn up and start grabbing people in the scoops and piling them into the back of the garbage truck.
Like
and I'm
bulldozer front loaders.
I'm like, okay, first of all, how fucking slow are these people running? And then, but he takes shots at the guy, and they get into a fight, and then he throws the guy, and the guy lands on the ground, and then the scooper comes down and fucking squashes him flat.
Yeah.
But it squashes him flat, you hear the scream, and then it cuts away, and then it cuts back, and there's just like a little bit of like blood there.
And his leg.
Okay. I'm like, come on. We're already in, like, we're approaching the mid-70s. There is already a thriving horror industry out there that specializes in blood bags. Get those fucking people in. Let's see some splatter when that goes off.
Do you think?
I think that would have made it more cartoony, though. You know,
I don't know.
I think it would have taken it out. I think it would have like taken it out of that realm of like, let's try to make this a grounded movie, and it might have been too exaggerated. Because when this is going to sound creepy, but when you watch people die in real life, there is not tons of blood everywhere and like huge splatters. You know, and I'm talking about people jump.
That's fair, but also all you get though is like the thing comes down and it just sounds like it crushed his testicle.
I think they just didn't want to lose. I don't think they wanted to lose their PG rating. This movie was rated fucking PG. They didn't want to go to PG-13.
It's crazy, but Indiana Jones was also.
They had enough money to bribe the MPA.
Well, like I think Temple of Doom is also a PG movie, right? And that's extremely violent.
E.T. is now too.
Yeah.
This is what America does, dude. We will not show you a limp dick or a vagina, but we will fucking crush people under scoopers and give it a PG rating, dude. We will get a violent as fuck. Bring your kids. Bring the whole family.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So basically we get to the big end. Let's talk about the end, because I'm sure everybody's heard it. So I'll turn the spoiler alert on. And so basically we get to the end and he realizes that, these people they're basically using the dead bodies to make the Soylent Green because they've run out of algae. And so he goes to see his friend, and the last thing he's screaming as he's carried away after this big climactic fight scene is, Soylent Green is people. It's people. I don't know if that has the same effect nowadays. Like, because it was like, okay, cool. He yells out Soylent Green is people, and it kind of lost its effect on me, because if someone grabbed me on the street, held me up, and told me Popeye's spicy is people, I'm still getting a fucking 8-piece.
But here's the thing is, have you been conditioned from so many people making fun of this movie that it's lost its impact?
It's the longest setup to a one-liner ever.
Come on. Fucking Popeye's chicken.
Hey, Popeye's chicken is fucking awesome.
We are not saying Popeye's chicken is made from humans, by the way, just to clarify. Yeah. Respect to Popeye's chicken made from actual birds. Yeah, Dave, do you think that was you being conditioned, that you've heard that line a lot, or do you think it was
absolutely
the only
do.
thought
I absolutely do. I think it, because I'd seen it parodied so many times before I'd seen the film, like, it didn't have as much of an effect. But everything before it did. So, like, the big climactic ending I was waiting for, like, wasn't what I thought it was. It was something else. It happens aside from that line.
By the way, so Dave and John, really quick, did you guys? So your introduction to this movie is essentially the final line, right?
Yeah.
So I think that could really fuck up your experience, though, because that's honestly, actually supposed to be this huge reveal, but no one really gets it, because in pulp culture that's been made fun of so much.
I had heard about this movie, but I honestly, if I did know that, I had forgotten about it. So I really wasn't. I wasn't spoiled by that. The only thing that maybe I would say, it didn't disappoint me. I knew where it was going. I knew Charlton was at the lead. I knew he was going to scream something at the end of this movie. Like, it's going to happen. I knew he was going to do it. So I was just kind of waiting for it. But I did kind of hope, because I thought they were going there. They sort of did this a few times with Saul's death and blah, blah. You have to find the proof. And they couldn't actually say it. I thought they were going to have us very clearly see, or in some way perceive, what Charleston has seen and learned, but that he too was not going to be able to communicate. I thought he was going to die, or when he was being carried out, he was going to be incapable of actually saying it. He was, he was in so much pain or something, and he was going to, that the words were never actually going to be spoken. So then we would have been left with the truth as audience members. I did have a little moment where I was like, I kind of wish they would have just let us know. And then he didn't scream it into a church of a bunch of crowded people. But
by the way, question: when movies do that, where their reveal is like cut off, say, like you were saying, the character dies, and like then these other people, like the police officer, his boss, they don't find out. Do you find that does that? I'm assuming the answer is going to be no, but does that bother you as an audience member that like the mission of the main character was never accomplished? Because me, sometimes I'm like, shit, what a pointless movie, because he never even got his message out,
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll cite Terminator 3 for this. Terminator 3, like they spent this whole time trying to prevent Judgment Day, and then in one movie they're like, oh, we're going to cause it instead. Fuck you guys.
No, I'll push back against both of you. I like it when that is handled. When that's handled well, I think that is. I think it's the most. I think that can be one of the most powerful elements when you are stranded as an audience member with knowledge that something you've had a God's eye the entire movie. Mm-hmm. You finally learn the thing, and you're stuck in that place. You're stuck. It almost feels like it's the anguish that you have from being stranded with your protagonist. They are the only ones who know, and they'll never be able to say anything because for whatever reason, if they're dead or they can't speak or they lost their opportunity to say it. I don't know. I've always felt like with conspiracy movies specifically, and I think it works really well in sci-fi too, mm-hmm. when you know something that no one else knows, especially if you know it with the protagonist. I don't know. I think that can be used very tastefully. It doesn't bother me as long as it makes me upset. That upset feeling is kind of what I'm looking for from these movies. I didn't think he was going to successfully, tell everybody about this, and they were going to be like, "Oh, let's shut Soylent down."
Yeah,
I didn't think that was going to happen.
To your point, John, I think Scanner Darkly is a good example of that. Then,
nice, dude.
So
I'm going to add that to my list.
In short,
I should have seen that by now.
What John is saying is he preferred the original ending to Dodgeball.
Yes.
By the way, do you think I wonder if the filmmakers were like, let's make it like, he doesn't get his point across, but at that time, you know how the studios are always like, oh no, we need like a full story and the audience has to be satisfied in this way. I think that if they made this movie today, they might do that.
I do too.
Because I think it's more sci-fi movies nowadays like to fuck with the audience, I find.
Yeah, and they're pretty much the only ones that can.
It's also not aimed at.
As long as they're not made by Warner Brothers.
It's not aimed, I was just about to say. Yeah.
It kind of sounds to Dave like you just want to drink. You're basically
can't help myself sometimes. All right.
I kind of want to say something bad about this movie so I can drink something. Okay, they did these weird particle effects over those crowd scenes, and it looked like shitty dirt. Did that throw you off a bit?
There you go.
Yeah.
Cool. There you go. Yeah.
Here's you, Dave.
I don't think that threw me off very much. What
I just wanted a drink, about? John.
All right.
That was a rhetorical, thirsty question. Fun fact: the video game at the beginning of the film, when he walks in, and she's playing the video game, was an actual real video game. Like that was
Asteroids?
It wasn't. It was. I think it was literally called what was written on it, but it was actually made and designed by the guy who went on to form a little company known as Atari.
Wow, that's fucking dope!
Yeah.
Holy shit! I wish I researched films now.
Fun little side note for anyone who stayed to the end of the episode. See, it's worth it. It's worth it. Stick around.
I love that movies from the 70s that are set in the future, everybody still dresses like it's the 70s.
Yeah.
It's very specific
by the way,
to that decade.
I love the way. Did you see how Charlton Heston's pants look? They're fucking dope.
They are dope as shit. Did you notice how Simonson, the main guy who gets murdered, he is literally wearing Austin Powers' leisure suit. Did you notice that? He is the exact
That's the
same
era though, Justin.
Yeah.
But you really feel it when you see like the texture of the clothing, where it's just like giant houndstooth. in brown.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh,
at the
that's
end of
definitely a 70s
at the end,
thing.
they're expecting Mark to stand up and actually be wearing those pants from the movie. But
Well, I do have gray
Look,
pants on, so
I'm disappointed you don't have them on, guys. We would be assholes if we didn't address the fact that a lot of the women in this movie are playing prostitutes,
and they're called furniture.
And they're called furniture. They literally. So because so much of this movie is him investigating the life of the 1%, because he's doing a very specific case that is based on this guy who was murdered, who was one of the most powerful men in the world. He's spending a lot of time in that echelon. And so at these apartment buildings, there are women who basically come with the apartment, and they are called furniture. And that definitely, I thought about that quite a bit. I don't know if you guys did. Like, was that them in the 70s or whenever this book was written, 50s or 60s? Was that them saying we're going to regress?
Well, I mean, look at women
are furniture again, are treated so low? Or are they saying as a form of regression? Or were they making an even more bold statement that was basically saying nothing's ever going to change?
Well, look at it now. Women are kind of treated like shit. They make less money. They, and also it's sort of, so to me, it's Soylent Green is like this hyper caricature of our society now. Like if we keep continuing to do what we do. I mean, to me, it's a horrible thing to call women furniture, but for this movie, when he's like, furniture, you as an audience member understand everything you need to know about how women are treated in society. So to me, in the realm of that movie, it makes sense.
Yeah, I think as far as the predicting stuff, they've missed the mark there, because the 1%ers are doing just fine with women, like Bezos, Zuckerberg. Like none of those have had any issues whatsoever.
No issues.
I'll buzz myself for that one.
Yeah, you know what? There you go. I got you. That's
although Jeff and Bill both got divorced, so maybe not so much.
Yeah, exactly. That's what they're fucking it up.
But if you think of it like in terms of like ultra wealthy people, and if you can buy anything and own anything, why not people too? So it sort of makes sense if you have this, because if you look in this universe, the rich are super rich. There's not much of a middle class, and it's like the poor people are just like treated like shit. I mean,
on the other side
he's
of a
stepping over people
moat
on a stairway every day. It's fucking crazy. It's a good. I think it's a good example of what happens if you have like severe overpopulation and you don't try to be. You know, it's weird though, because you think about it, like the Soylent company is kind of like almost like Beyond Meats and all this other stuff. I guess it's to this degree where it's sort of like, you know, society. We have so many people that it's like, even if you try to conserve and do other things, it's still fucked, just because, I mean, 40 million people in New York City, that's a huge population growth, because it felt crowded at like, we're like at 8-9 million, you know? Can you imagine taking the subway at 40 million?
No, I can't fucking imagine.
And then we went back down a little bit. But
Soylent made me think about Monsanto, because Monsanto is the big ag company. They literally own the copyright to the soybean. They changed the genetics of it. It is the only soybean produced around the world nowadays. They own the seed.
Yeah.
And then
they tried to do that with basmati
They would
rice.
Totally try to do this shit.
Then they cross-pollinate with the farm next
rice?
door and sue them because their seed got into next door, like as well. So yeah, they're totally insidious.
Did you
see this shit
come
happen.
at me, Monsanto?
Well, here's you want to hear a crazy story? So concentration camps in World War II. I think it was what was it? Not Dachau. It was the one in Poland. I always fucking forget the name. That's
not in Poland, but Auschwitz was the other.
Auschwitz, yeah. So you have like Auschwitz-Birkenau. IG Farben ran the concentration camps. IG Farben got split into 4 companies. Bayer is one of them. Bayer now owns Monsanto. Isn't that crazy? Exactly. So IG Farben's still alive and they own Monsanto.
Yeah. I know, when you trace those German companies,
Monsanto.
Sick,
you know the
fuck you, Monsanto.
You know the numbers that they would give the Jews, like the company that created the machines to calculate those was IBM. So a lot of these horrible companies are still around, which is why I love movies that show how evil corporations are and what they're capable of, because obviously
It's what they're
they've done horrific
exactly, dude.
shit.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's what you're saying. It's what they're
Windows
capable of,
Vista.
which is why I think sci-fi. Yeah, which is why. Fuck you. Which is why I feel like. Which is why movies like this are important, because it is such a perfect example of. Again, sci-fi is commenting on the way society actually exists now, but it's set in a different time, like we were saying. So, government and corporations. Let's just use the two biggest extremes. I think oftentimes people think that it's just pure evil, or there's no control. When I think when it's done really well, these movies and these stories teach you, or at least demonstrate to you, that without being checked, this is what could fucking happen. If you're only allowing the bottom line to dictate like every move, then this movie, the pitch of it sounds fucking crazy. It's not that fucking crazy if there are companies who have been influenced under certain situations in the past and they've tried to enable those kinds of things. I mean, give me a break. I don't know. Every time I watched, I literally thought about Monsanto and Bayer while I was watching this movie. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they are inherently evil. But if we don't check them,
is fucking
then
evil.
There's no... I mean, they're certainly
like
capable of performing in it. Yes.
Bayer is essentially Bayer Agfa, and there's two other companies are essentially IG Farben. So you can see what happens when you have like, which is essentially a fascist government, when you have like corporations and the government in league together, awful shit happens. And this I think as the older this film gets, the more true it will become, unless
because what I loved about this, and we haven't talked about this yet, there is only one fucking scene that has anyone from the government in it. It's the governor of New York. He's in a tree sanctuary, which is just like a little pop-up tent, basically, with the last 3 fucking trees on the world in the middle of Central Park. And that is the only time he is seen. And it is very clear, the way the scene is written, that he has way less power than the Soylent Corporation. So he makes some comment about do whatever you have to do. He's talking to the guy who's, clearly the hitman, the fix-it guy for the Soylent. And he's going to organize the hit on Charlton Heston and everyone else involved in the chain for leaking this information. So I really loved that it's an obvious element. It's such a big part of the piece that you might not even think about it when you're watching it. But there is commentary there that like the government had nothing to do with what was happening. Soylent ran the world, and no one could have done anything, because I would still say this is an argument. Think about what was happening in the 70s. Jimmy Carter's movement coming out of the Nixon era. They were trying to bring people back to being active civilians, active in politics. And I don't know, man.
John's
Fuck
triggered
you.
the gush alarm.
I think this is, I'll drink. But I do think this is what can happen when people don't check the powers that be. This shit is inevitable if you don't check it. So as much as I just ordered a new Apple computer, I eat soybeans, we do all these fucking things. But movies like this remind you that like we're all kind of supporting the same monster that under really bad circumstances could fucking rule everybody on this fucking planet. Let's be real.
Well, here, to your point, John, the NSA just awarded Amazon a $10 billion contract. Right?
What the fuck? This one, NSA.
This is the same NSA that was Well, here's the thing: is like Amazon is all.
Lawsuit?
Well, think about it this way: like Amazon is essentially, it's not to sell books and all this other shit. It's a data collection company. And what does the NSA do? NSA is also a data collection company or data collection for the government. So now you have a huge corporation plus the US government working together. So like, and the other thing is too, when you have corporations like Apple's worth like what, $2 trillion, like, do you know, they're worth more than many countries. So
I'd also like to say, NSA, you're doing a wonderful job. My green card number is,
actually, that's the wrong one. Dave, here you go. Hey, motherfucker, drink that shit. Yeah, no, dude, you're right. And what, you know what? What's a conspiracy movie supposed to do? Get you fucking talking about this shit. And I hope we don't sound like fucking crazy people. They're just, when conspiracy movies and stories are done really well, they're rooted in truth. They're not rooted in lunacy that you find on the internet that isn't confounded and corroborated by any legitimate source. This is all fucking right there for you to see. They took a very simple concept, overpopulation, and food distribution, and they monetized it and turned it into a story. It's just so simple. It's right there. You don't have to reach into the bowels of fucking Democrats drinking the blood of babies and shit. This shit is more realistic.
You know what? By the way, you know what's sad about these? The sad thing about these movies is they age well.
Fuck you. How about that? Sorry, I interrupted your pun.
I was basically saying it's sad that these movies age well, because that means nothing has changed and they become more true and more like documentaries than films.
It's like Idiocracy. They never intended that to be a documentary either. So yeah, it's just the same deal. I do need to break this up because we are fast approaching the longest episode we've ever done in this format. So
fucking proud of that. Soylent Green.
On Soylent Green.
Who would have thought?
I mean, this is what happened. I'm drunk. That's part of what's happening.
So,
Dave, bring us home, dude.
Before we go, we're going to do what we normally do, which is what have you been watching lately? Did you get a chance to watch anything this week, guys, you'd like to plug?
Yeah, Mark, you don't have, not to put you on the spot. I can go first unless you have something you want to recommend quickly, Dave.
No, you guys can go first. I'll go last.
I watched I'm a bit of a political junkie, and I guess that's going to be clear. I just watched that 3-part documentary series on Obama on HBO Max. It was actually pretty interesting. Well done. Not kissing the ring too much. I think anyone who has problems with this administration has a very fair stance, but it was very interesting. After the trauma of the past 4 years, just watching how somebody else with good morals and ethics actually did try to rise to a level of power. So that was really telling. And I got to see, I'm in grad school at USC now. So every now and then I get some sneak peek things, which is really fun. So I just got to watch the first 3 episodes of a new series called The Chair, starring, what's her name from Sideways, and is Jay Duplass and Sandra Oh. It's created by Amanda Peet and somebody else. Anyway, really cool. Okay. She's the first female chair of a really prestigious fictional English department of university. Excited for that to come out. It comes out on the 20th, this Friday. So I definitely recommend checking that out.
Oh, cool.
How about you guys? Mark, Dave, anybody watch anything of note?
I saw The Green Knight, which if you like
we've done The Green Knight.
It's fantastic.
I still haven't seen it, though. I still haven't seen it. I think I'm going to really love it.
It's a great movie.
I think I'm going to love it.
So I think it's worth a theater viewing too, because it's a beautiful film.
It is beautiful.
I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And the sound, I think the sound design alone needs that theater experience.
Yeah, I will throw back to my wife was furious after watching that because of what they did to the storyline, because she's read the original poem, etc., and she posted about it in her literature group that she follows online, and it blew the fuck up, and to the point where we had I think 52 people in France download our episodes last month.
Wow.
So it's like, thanks. It's just because they were pissed.
As the French often are.
Yeah.
They were pissed
Good for you guys.
something.
Glad to have you. Love your breakfast foods.
How about you, Dave?
I watched the rest of Gunpowder Milkshake.
I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
That is beautiful as well. It's like there's color everywhere in this thing. It's so stylized and stuff like that. I feel like the ending was not written for me, because like I was more like, yeah, go for it, get revenge, but they went the other way with it. I feel like it was written like by women for women, and it resolved in a way that they'd relate to more than I would. But it was still a good ending. But I just feel like...
So you're saying you think you know what women think, Dave? Is that what you're,
yeah, because I've told them. No.
Too many jokes. Okay.
That's
Couldn't
getting
help
cut.
myself. That was wide open. No, it's not. It's staying on.
I'm sorry. No. No, what I mean is like...
Don't walk it back, motherfucker. I know what you meant. You didn't do anything wrong.
You know
it's
what I
all
meant.
good. You didn't do anything wrong.
And
no,
also,
I hear you loud
I'm
and
going
clear.
through Star Wars Clone Wars at the moment as well, the animated series.
The animated series I've heard is good.
That is on my should have seen this by now, because like a lot of my friends at work are like, you haven't watched that yet? They're 2 series ahead of you. So yeah.
Fuck. Cool. Well, that was really fun. We have Mark Monstroski from the Matt and Mark Movie Show. He's with us. He's going to stay with us. We're going to take some breaks and we're going to record the episode that will be released a little later in the week on another Should Have Seen It By Now, where all three of us are the fucks who have not seen the animated iconic hit Frozen from 2013. I don't know if anyone, I'm going to repeat it because I don't know if you've heard of this movie. It's called Frozen. It's made by this tiny company called Disney. We're going to be talking about it. Feel free to tune into that one that should be released on Thursday. So thanks for tuning in, film fans. We will see you soon. Go watch Soylent Green.